Ethan Carter was the kind of man neighbors envied quietly, dubbing him the fortunate one. At 32, he had carved out a successful career as a software engineer at a cutting-edge tech firm in Austin, Texas. His modest ranch-style home in a serene suburban enclave was a model of order, its lawn impeccably trimmed, the driveway swept clean of fallen leaves, and the porch adorned with neatly potted plants. Colleagues at his company admired his dependability, his code always clean, and his deadlines met with precision. Friends valued his calm, even-keeled nature, the way he listened thoughtfully and diffused tension with a wry smile. Yet beneath this polished exterior, Ethan carried a hollow ache that no promotion or praise could fill. For 8 years, Aisha had been the heart of his world, and her absence had left a void that gnawed at him relentlessly. Their story began a decade earlier, during Ethan's semester abroad in Bangalore as part of a computer science exchange program. Aisha Kapoor worked as a translator for a global consulting firm, her sharp intellect and linguistic prowess bridging cultures for international clients. Their paths crossed in a bustling cafe on Commercial Street, where the air was thick with the aroma of filter coffee and the clamor of vendors outside. Ethan, struggling with his rudimentary Hindi, fumbled through ordering a chai. Aisha, seated at the next table, offered to help, her warm smile disarming his embarrassment. What started as a light-hearted language exchange, her teaching him Hindi phrases, him introducing her to American slang like cool beans and spill the tea, blossomed into a connection that felt fated. Aisha was unlike anyone Ethan had known. She moved with an effortless grace, her traditional kurtas as natural on her as her occasional jeans and blouses. Fluent in 4 languages, Hindi, English, Kannada, and Marathi, she wove stories of her life with a vibrancy that captivated him. Aisha hailed from a respectable middle-class family in Mumbai. Her father, Anil, was a meticulous accountant, his health frail from years of overwork, while her mother, Sunita, taught history at a local school, instilling in Aisha a love for learning. Though rooted in tradition, they were progressive enough to support Aisha's independence, encouraging her career and her dreams of seeing the world. When Ethan proposed, after a whirlwind romance that spanned late-night walks through Bangalore's vibrant markets and quiet evenings under the city's banyan trees, her family welcomed him with open arms. The Kapoor's hospitality was overwhelming, plates piled high with homemade biryani, laughter filling their modest Mumbai home. Despite occasional cultural misunderstandings, Ethan's unfamiliarity with certain customs, like removing shoes before entering, her parents embraced him as their own. Their wedding was a beautiful fusion of cultures. In Austin, they exchanged vows in a simple courthouse ceremony, Ethan in a tailored suit, Aisha in a cream dress that shimmered under the Texas sun. Months later, in Bangalore, they celebrated with a vibrant Hindu ceremony under a flower-draped mandip, the sacred Agni ritual binding them amidst chants and the glow of oil lamps. The festivities spanned days, filled with music, dance, and feasts that brought together Ethan's small contingent of American friends and Aisha's sprawling extended family. Among them, Aisha's uncle, Vikram Kapoor, loomed large. A successful real estate magnate in his 50s, Vikram carried himself with an air of authority, his tailored suits and commanding presence signaling wealth and influence. With Anil's health declining, Vikram had become the de facto patriarch, orchestrating family decisions with a firm hand. He oversaw the wedding preparations with meticulous care, ensuring every detail, from the marigold garlands to the priest's chants, was flawless. Ethan, though grateful, felt a subtle unease at Vikram's dominance, sensing an unspoken expectation that Aisha's loyalty belonged first to her family. The couple settled in Austin, where Aisha took a job as a cultural consultant for a multinational corporation, guiding American firms through the complexities of South Asian markets. Their cozy apartment became a vibrant tapestry of their worlds, shelves lined with Indian spices next to jars of Texan barbecue sauce, Bollywood soundtracks mingling with the twang of country music on lazy weekends. The scent of sandalwood incense blended with the rich aroma of Ethan's morning coffee. He learned to cook dal and perfect the fluffiness of roti, while Aisha mastered the art of a juicy burger and a golden Thanksgiving turkey. Their early years were a symphony of balance. Ethan's analytical mind complemented Aisha's intuitive warmth, her global perspective enriching his practical worldview. Friends marveled at their chemistry, the way they finished each other's sentences or exchanged knowing glances during lively dinner parties. Ethan even picked up basic Hindi phrases, delighting Aisha with his earnest attempts, while she developed a surprising fondness for baseball, cheering for the Texas Rangers with a fervor that matched his own. Yet cracks began to form beneath the surface. Aisha's longing for her family intensified during Hindu festivals like Diwali and Holi, when the absence of her loved ones left her adrift. Ethan tried to recreate the traditions, lighting diyas, preparing sweets, but he struggled to grasp their emotional weight, his efforts feeling hollow to Aisha. Her phone calls to Mumbai grew longer, often ending in tears as she spoke with her mother or cousins, the distance amplifying her homesickness. Vikram's biannual visits to Austin, meant to be joyous reunions, became sources of tension. A commanding figure with a penchant for luxury cars and Rolex watches, Vikram subtly asserted control over their household, critiquing Ethan's limited grasp of Indian customs and emphasizing Aisha's ties to her heritage. During these visits, Aisha's demeanor shifted. She spoke mostly in Hindi, adopted a deferential tone, and seemed to embody a version of herself Ethan rarely saw. When he left the room, their conversations would halt abruptly, leaving him feeling like an outsider in his own home. Vikram's lavish gifts, gold jewelry for Aisha, rare whiskeys for Ethan, felt less like generosity and more like assertions of power. By the third year of their marriage, the harmony began to fray. Aisha grew restless, her longing to visit her ailing mother in Mumbai becoming a recurring theme. She spoke of extended stays, months, perhaps, prompting tense conversations with Ethan, whose demanding job made such trips impossible. "I need to be there for her," Aisha would say, her voice heavy with guilt. Ethan, torn between supporting her and maintaining their life in Austin, felt a growing distance he couldn't name. The turning point came in the fall of 2015, when a late-night call from Mumbai brought devastating news. Sunita's condition had worsened, requiring specialized treatment unavailable locally. Without hesitation, Aisha booked a flight for the following week. Ethan offered to join her, but she gently declined. "You can't jeopardize your job," she said, her eyes glistening. "I might be gone for months." Their farewell at Austin Bergstrom International Airport was wrenching. They clung to each other, Aisha's tears soaking Ethan's shirt as she whispered, "I'll be back soon." For the first few weeks, they stayed connected through daily Skype calls and WhatsApp messages. Aisha shared updates on her mother's grueling treatment, the hospital's sterile corridors, and the emotional toll on her family. But as weeks turned into months, their communication dwindled. Calls became sporadic, her messages brief, citing time differences, unreliable hospital Wi-Fi, and exhaustion. Ethan, though worried, didn't press her, trusting her need for space. Then, after 2 months, contact ceased entirely. His calls went unanswered, his texts unread. Panic gripped him. He reached out to Vikram's Mumbai office, only to be told by a curt secretary that Mr. Kapoor was in Dubai on business, unreachable. Desperate, Ethan contacted the U.S. consulate in Mumbai, pleading for help in locating his wife. The officials confirmed Aisha's arrival in India, but could offer little else. Her trail had gone cold. On a frigid Tuesday morning in January 2016, Ethan's phone rang at 7:03 a.m., the international code for India flashing on the screen. His heart leaped, expecting Aisha's voice. Instead, a man with halting English introduced himself as Sub-Inspector Arjun Desai of the Mumbai Police. "Mr. Carter, please sit down," he said, his tone formal. "We have found a woman matching your wife's description." Ethan's breath caught as Desai delivered the news. Aisha Kapoor Carter had been found dead in a burned-out car on Mumbai's outskirts, the vehicle having plunged off an embankment and ignited. Identification was challenging due to severe burns, but a gold bangle engraved with their wedding date and her U.S. passport confirmed her identity. The world tilted. Ethan's phone slipped from his hand, clattering to the kitchen floor as Desai's voice droned on. "Accident. No foul play. Body cremated per Hindu rites. Ashes released to family." When Ethan regained his senses, the call had ended, the dial tone a hollow echo in his silent apartment. He called the Mumbai police repeatedly, but Desai was unavailable. Another officer recited the case details mechanically. File MB20168847. Victim Aisha Carter. Cause of death: burns in a car accident. Case closed. When Ethan demanded an autopsy, he was told the body's condition made it impossible, and the family had already conducted the cremation. "What family?" Ethan shouted. "I'm her husband." The officer's response was cold. Vikram Kapoor, listed as her emergency contact with power of attorney, had handled all formalities. Ethan's grief gave way to horror as he realized Aisha had granted Vikram this authority without his knowledge, likely before her departure. He tried to book a flight to Mumbai, but visa delays, missing documents, bureaucratic red tape kept him trapped in Austin, his world unraveling as the woman he loved became a memory, her fate sealed by a family he barely understood. The U.S. consulate in Mumbai informed Ethan Carter that the case of Aisha Kapoor Carter's death was officially closed, with no further investigation deemed necessary. Vikram Kapoor, according to his office, remained unreachable, ostensibly away on business in Dubai. Ethan felt ensnared in a surreal, Kafkaesque nightmare. Each attempt to uncover the truth met with locked doors and bureaucratic dead ends. His calls to the Mumbai police yielded only rehearsed responses, and his visa application to India stalled under a tangle of missing forms and vague rejections. Desperation gnawed at him, his grief compounded by a growing suspicion that something was amiss. After 2 agonizing weeks, Vikram finally returned his call. His voice, heavy with feigned sorrow, crackled through the line. "Aisha's death has broken me," Vikram said, his tone laden with a practiced melancholy. "She was like a daughter to me." He recounted the events leading to her death. Aisha's mother, Sunita, had been gravely ill, and Aisha had devoted herself to her care, spending long hours at the hospital. When Sunita passed away, Aisha spiraled into a deep depression. That night, Vikram said, his voice breaking, she took the car to clear her mind, something she'd done since she was young. The road was treacherous, steep curves, rain-slicked. She wasn't herself after her mother's death. She blamed herself for leaving Sunita to live in America. "I should never have let her drive alone." Ethan listened, his heart aching as Vikram's words painted a picture of the Aisha he knew. Emotional, quick to shoulder guilt for things beyond her control. Yet, cracks in the story gnawed at him. Why hadn't Aisha told him about her mother's death? Why had she cut off contact rather than leaning on him for support? Vikram explained that the police found no evidence of suicide or foul play, attributing the crash to a deadly mix of emotional distress, poor weather, and a notoriously dangerous road. Aisha's ashes, he said, had been scattered in the Ganges, per her wishes outlined in a letter she'd left behind. He promised to send Ethan a copy, but weeks passed with no letter, only excuses about lost mail or technical issues. Ethan's repeated calls to Vikram's office were met with deflections, deepening his unease. In Austin, Ethan organized a memorial service without Aisha's body, a haunting ritual that felt more like a dream than reality. Friends and colleagues gathered in a small community center, their condolences echoing hollowly as Ethan stood before a framed photo of Aisha, her radiant smile frozen in time. He spoke of her warmth, her laughter, her ability to light up a room, but the words felt inadequate. How could he mourn someone he hadn't truly said goodbye to? The scent of her jasmine perfume lingered in their apartment. Her clothes still hung in the closet, and her books, dog-eared novels and cultural guides, sat untouched on the nightstand. Unable to bear the memories, Ethan sold the house and moved to a sterile, minimalist apartment across town, its bare walls a stark contrast to the vibrant life he'd lost. Grief consumed him. His work at the tech firm suffered. Bugs crept into his code, deadlines slipped. Friendships frayed as he withdrew, unable to face the pity in others' eyes. At night, when sleep eluded him, doubts festered. Why had the Mumbai police closed the case so swiftly? Why had Vikram, not Ethan, been listed as Aisha's emergency contact with power of attorney? The realization that Aisha had granted Vikram this authority without his knowledge felt like a betrayal, though he couldn't reconcile it with the woman he'd loved. These questions became a relentless torment, a splinter lodged in his mind. 2 years passed in a fog of emotional numbness. Ethan functioned, went to work, paid bills, stared blankly at the TV, but he wasn't truly living. Friends' invitations to dinners or outings were met with polite refusals. Joy felt like a betrayal of Aisha's memory. In 2018, his therapist, Dr. Sarah Chun, suggested a change of scenery might break the cycle of grief. Sometimes, a new environment can shift your perspective, she said. A job offer from Northwest Tech Solutions in Seattle, a promotion to senior systems architect, felt like a lifeline. Ethan accepted, hoping the move would dull the ache. Seattle, with its misty mornings and the soothing hum of Puget Sound, offered a cautious reprieve. At Northwest Tech, Ethan's expertise in cloud computing made him invaluable, his quiet diligence earning respect from colleagues who knew little of his past. He kept his grief locked away, sharing it only with Dr. Chun, who helped him navigate the complexities of unresolved loss. Complicated grief can linger for years, she explained. Closure isn't a moment, it's a process. His Capitol Hill apartment was deliberately sparse, its modern furniture and neutral tones devoid of personal touches, save for a small shrine on his nightstand. A photo of Aisha from their wedding day, flanked by a white candle and a Ganesha statue she'd given him. Each morning, he lit the candle, whispering to her, a ritual that anchored him. By spring 2024, Ethan felt the stirrings of a new beginning. Dr. Chun encouraged him to travel, to step outside the confines of his routine. A colleague, Amanda, suggested Vancouver, just a 3-hour drive from Seattle. It's like Seattle with a European twist, she teased. Perfect for easing back into the world. The idea took root, and in late September, Ethan booked a week-long trip, reserving a hotel room in Vancouver's bustling downtown with no set itinerary. Crossing the Canadian border, he felt an unfamiliar nervousness as he handed his passport to the officer, a friendly man who asked, "Purpose of your visit?" "Vacation," Ethan replied, the word feeling alien, heavy with guilt. Vancouver greeted him with autumnal splendor, skyscrapers framed by snow-capped mountains, the harbor alive with ferries and sailboats. He checked into his hotel on Robson Street, its sleek modernity a stark contrast to Austin's warmth. On his first day, he wandered the city, blending into the crowd of tourists, the anonymity freeing. On the second day, he visited Granville Island, its vibrant market buzzing with street musicians and the scent of fresh pastries. Sitting on a bench overlooking the water, Ethan felt a rare lightness, the rhythm of the boats soothing his restless mind. An elderly couple nearby spoke in Hindi, their voices stirring memories of Aisha, her animated phone calls with her mother, the Bollywood films they'd watched, her infectious excitement when switching between languages. The third day brought rain, and Ethan sought refuge in the Museum of Anthropology at UBC, captivated by exhibits on indigenous cultures and their oral traditions. A display on cultural assimilation and identity loss hit close to home, echoing Aisha's struggle to straddle her Indian roots and American life. On the fourth day, under a crisp October sun, he joined a harbor tour, standing at the boat's railing as Vancouver's skyline glided by. For the first time in 8 years, he felt alive, the wind on his face a quiet reminder of possibility. After docking at Canada Place, Ethan wandered into Gastown, its cobblestone streets and Victorian charm alive with restaurants and boutiques. Sipping coffee on a bench, he watched the world pass by, until his gaze caught a couple emerging from a side street, laughing. The man, tall and distinguished with graying temples, moved with a familiar authority. When he turned, Ethan's heart stopped. Vikram Kapoor. But it was the woman beside him who shattered his reality. She wore a blue dress and dark sunglasses, her hair shorter but unmistakable in its tilt, her laugh, her gait. The coffee cup slipped from Ethan's hand, shattering on the pavement. People glanced over, but he didn't notice. It was Aisha, his Aisha, alive, hand in hand with the man who'd claimed she was dead. The world blurred into a dizzying haze. Ethan's pulse thundered as he stood, legs unsteady, and followed them at a distance. His mind wrestled with the impossible. Either he was losing his sanity, or the woman he'd mourned for 8 years was alive, living a new life with Vikram. They entered a luxurious restaurant on Water Street, and Ethan, summoning his courage, followed. From a seat at the bar, he watched as Aisha removed her sunglasses, revealing the dark eyes he'd dreamed of, the faint scar above her eyebrow he'd kissed countless times. Vikram's hand grazed hers, an intimate gesture that spoke of years together. Ethan ordered a whiskey, then another, his hands shaking as he grappled with the betrayal. For 3 hours, he observed them, laughing, relaxed, a couple at ease. When they left, Ethan trailed them, his programmer's mind kicking into gear, documenting their movements with photos and notes on his phone. They visited a boutique, Aisha trying on dresses while Vikram offered opinions, her poses in the mirror achingly familiar. At an art gallery, they strolled hand in hand, discussing paintings. By 4 p.m., they climbed into a silver BMW convertible, and Ethan followed in his rental car to an affluent West Vancouver suburb. The car stopped at a sleek glass house on Chartwell Drive, its manicured garden and marble driveway screaming wealth. Ethan parked a block away, watching as Vikram unlocked the door, Aisha entering as if it were home. Back at his hotel, Ethan searched the address, 1247 Chartwell Drive, purchased 3 years ago for $2.8 million CAD by Richard Kapoor, Vikram's apparent Canadian alias. Sleepless, he pored over the photos, each one a dagger to his heart. The next morning, he returned to the house, watching from a distance. At 10 a.m., Vikram left in a black Mercedes, likely for work. Aisha remained. Ethan waited an hour, then approached the door and rang the bell. When Aisha opened it, dressed in a cream sweater and jeans, her hair in a loose bun, she didn't recognize him at first. Then her eyes widened, her face paling. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Aisha," he said, his calm belying the storm within. "You look awfully alive for a dead woman." She tried to shut the door, but Ethan braced his foot against it. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm. "I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "You've mistaken me for someone else." Ethan held up his phone, showing a photo from the previous day. "This is you, Aisha, with Vikram in Gastown yesterday, 8 years after you burned to death in Mumbai." Her legs buckled, and she leaned against the doorframe, her world unraveling as his had. Ethan Carter saw the panic flash in Aisha's eyes, her sharp intake of breath a familiar echo of the times he'd seen her cornered by a difficult family decision, by his own well-meaning but clumsy attempts to bridge their cultural divide. "Let me in," he said, his voice steady but edged with steel. "Or I'll call the police and tell them I found my wife, who's supposed to be dead." Aisha hesitated, her hand trembling on the doorframe, then stepped aside, her movements reluctant but resigned. The interior of the West Vancouver house was a study in opulence, soaring ceilings crowned with a crystal chandelier, modern art in bold strokes adorning the walls, and sleek furniture that spoke of wealth beyond Ethan's imagining. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a breathtaking view of the Pacific Ocean, its waves glinting under the October sun, with the snow-dusted North Shore mountains in the distance. It was a world away from the cozy, spice-scented apartment they'd shared in Austin, where Aisha's laughter had once filled the air. Ethan followed her into the living room, where they sat on opposite sofas, the space between them a chasm of 8 lost years. Silence hung heavy, broken only by the distant crash of waves. Aisha had aged, but her beauty remained undeniable. New lines etched around her eyes, strands of gray weaving through her hair, which she no longer dyed. Her silk blouse and diamond earrings caught the light, a stark contrast to the simple cordas she'd once favored. "Why?" Ethan finally asked, the word a raw wound, carrying the weight of his grief, betrayal, and disbelief. Aisha closed her eyes, drawing a shaky breath. When she opened them, tears glistened. "It wasn't planned," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not the way it happened." "What wasn't planned?" Ethan's voice trembled with suppressed anger. "Your death? Or convincing me you were gone?" Aisha's hands twisted in her lap. "Vikram and we had an affair," she confessed, the words spilling out like poison. "It started soon after our wedding. I know how awful that sounds, Ethan, but he understood parts of me you couldn't. My culture, my language, my roots." Ethan's stomach lurched, the revelation a physical blow. "You were sleeping with your uncle, my brother-in-law, since the start of our marriage?" "Not intentionally," Aisha said, her voice cracking. "It grew over time. When Vikram visited Austin, we'd talk about India, about family. You were so busy with work, always caught up in your projects. We were both lonely, in our own ways. So you decided to fake your death and run off with him? Ethan's voice rose, his hands clenching into fists. No. Aisha stood, pacing the room, her movements frantic. It wasn't like that. When I went to Mumbai for Mom, I was torn. I loved you, Ethan, but I also loved Vikram. I was lost, drowning in guilt and confusion. She sank back onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. Mom died 3 weeks after I arrived. I was devastated. Vikram was there, comforting me. One night, we were together, and I got pregnant. Ethan's world tilted again. Pregnant. The word felt like a blade, cutting through the fragile threads of his composure. I didn't know what to do, Aisha whispered. I couldn't come back to you, pregnant with his child. But I couldn't just vanish either. Vikram had an idea, a way out. Her voice trembled as she continued. A homeless woman had died in a car accident in Mumbai. Her body was unclaimed, unidentified. Vikram had police contacts. He arranged for her to be identified as me, using my passport and the bangle you gave me. You passed off a dead woman as you, Ethan said, his voice hollow, disbelief warring with rage. We thought it would be temporary, Aisha said, tears streaming down her face. Vikram said he'd tell you the truth later, when things settled. But time passed, and it became impossible. Ethan stood, walking to the window, the ocean's vastness mocking his turmoil. 8 years, Aisha. I mourned you for 8 years. I sold our home, left Austin, spent years in therapy trying to survive your death. And you were here, living in luxury. We didn't plan to come to Canada, Aisha said softly. But when it was clear we couldn't go back, Vikram arranged new identities. We arrived 6 years ago. She hesitated, her voice breaking. The baby. I had a miscarriage in the 4th month. It nearly destroyed me. Are you married? Ethan asked, his voice flat. She nodded, eyes downcast. 5 years ago, under our new names. I'm Shreya Sharma now. Vikram is Richard. And my pain. Ethan's voice cracked. My 8 years of hell? Did that factor into your plans? Aisha sobbed, her shoulders shaking. I thought about you every day, Ethan. It broke my heart, but I didn't know how to undo it. The longer it went on, the more trapped I felt. You could have called me, he said, his voice rising. You could have told me the truth. And then what? Aisha's eyes met his, pleading. You'd have hated me. Our families would have been torn apart. And Vikram? He said we could go to prison for insurance fraud. Ethan froze. Insurance fraud? Aisha's face paled, realizing her slip. There was a life insurance policy, she whispered. Vikram took it out on me, said it was for security. I signed the papers without thinking. It was $2 million. Ethan sank back onto the sofa, the pieces falling into place. The lavish house, the BMW, the tailored suits. It wasn't just love or betrayal, it was greed. You cashed in a policy on your life, he said, his voice barely audible. You stole my life for money. Vikram said we needed it for our new start. Aisha said, her voice trembling. The insurance company wouldn't notice. I was scared. Ethan, pregnant, alone, grieving. I wasn't thinking clearly. Where's Vikram now? Ethan asked, his tone cold. At work, Aisha replied. He runs a real estate company here. He'll be back around 6. Ethan glanced at his watch. 2 p.m. I'll wait, he said, settling into the sofa, his resolve hardening. The next 4 hours crawled by, each minute heavy with tension. Aisha paced between the kitchen and the terrace, her movements jittery. She tried to convince Ethan to leave, offering money, begging him to walk away and pretend he'd never seen her. Vikram will be furious, she warned repeatedly. He has a temper when he feels cornered. Good, Ethan said, his voice like ice. So do I. As they waited, Aisha revealed more in halting fragments, each word a shard of glass. After her staged death, she and Vikram had hidden in a remote cottage in Maharashtra's Western Ghats, far from Mumbai's prying eyes. Vikram wound down his business, funneling the insurance money through offshore accounts to obscure its origins. They lived in isolation, Aisha cut off from the world, unable to contact anyone. It was a prison, she admitted, her voice hollow. Vikram controlled everything. Where I went, who I spoke to. He said it was for my safety, but I felt suffocated. It took nearly 2 years to secure their Canadian identities. Vikram, through his network of shady contacts, paid $500,000 to a document forgery ring specializing in wealthy clients seeking new lives. They received flawless backstories, birth certificates, degrees, employment histories, even fabricated social media profiles stretching back years. "How did you get into Canada?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. "Vikram invested $1 million in a Canadian startup for an investor visa," Aisha said. "I came as his wife after we married in a private ceremony in New Delhi. The documents were perfect. No one suspected a thing. Vikram studied the immigration system, memorized every loophole. We practiced Canadian accents, learned our new histories by heart." Ethan's gaze swept the room. The marble floors, the designer furniture, the ocean view. "This life," he said, gesturing to the opulence. "It's more than $2 million. Vikram's a brilliant businessman," Aisha said, her voice tinged with resignation. "He invested the insurance money wisely. His real estate company here is thriving. We've done well." She lowered her eyes. "But I think of you every day, Ethan. I followed your career online, saw you move to Seattle. I was relieved you were okay, that you were succeeding." "Succeeding?" Ethan's voice broke, raw with pain. "I wasn't succeeding. I was surviving. For 8 years, I was a ghost, believing you were dead." At 5:30 p.m., the rumble of a car in the driveway shattered the silence. Aisha froze, her face ashen. "He's here," she whispered. Ethan heard the front door open, followed by Vikram's voice calling out in Hindi, a cheerful greeting that carried the confidence of a man in control. Aisha responded hesitantly, her words clipped. Footsteps approached, steady and purposeful. Vikram appeared in the doorway, his tailored suit impeccable, his Rolex glinting under the chandelier's light. His hair was fully gray now, his face etched with the authority of wealth, but his eyes held the same calculating sharpness Ethan remembered. When he saw Ethan on the sofa, he stopped dead, his expression shifting from surprise to guarded recognition. For a long moment, the two men faced each other in silence. The husband who had mourned a fabricated death and the man who had orchestrated it. Ethan's hands clenched, his voice low and steady. "Hello, Vikram. Or should I say Richard?" Vikram's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. The air crackled with tension, years of deception converging in a single, suffocating moment. "Ethan," Vikram Kapoor said, his voice deceptively calm, a practiced veneer honed by years of boardroom negotiations. He stood in the doorway of his opulent West Vancouver home, his tailored suit and Rolex watch gleaming under the chandelier's soft glow. "This is unexpected." Ethan Carter rose from the sofa, his body taut with 8 years of suppressed grief and rage. "Unexpected," he said, his voice steady but laced with venom. "Imagine my surprise, finding my wife alive after mourning her death." Vikram's eyes flicked to Aisha, who flinched as if struck, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "What did you tell him?" he asked her in Hindi, his tone sharp. "Let's speak English," Ethan interjected, stepping forward. "I've been lied to for 8 years. I deserve to understand what's being said." Vikram moved to the sleek bar in the corner, pouring himself a whiskey with deliberate precision, his shoulders betraying a coiled tension. He didn't offer Ethan or Aisha a drink. "You shouldn't be here," he said, taking a measured sip, his eyes never leaving Ethan. "No," Ethan agreed, his voice cold. "I should be at a gravesite, mourning my dead wife. Instead, I find her alive, married to you." Quite the plot twist. Vikram set down his glass, his gaze hardening. "The situation is complicated." "Complicated?" Ethan's laugh was bitter, echoing in the cavernous living room with its ocean view. "You faked Aisha's death, cashed in a $2 million insurance policy, and destroyed my life. I call that criminal." Vikram's eyes glinted with a dangerous edge. "Be careful with your accusations, Ethan. You're in my house, in my country. My rules apply here." "Your rules?" Ethan repeated, his voice rising. "You mean the rules of forging identities and committing fraud? You stole 8 years of my life, Vikram. You made me believe Aisha was dead while you lived here in luxury." Vikram's voice remained emotionless, but his words cut deep. "Aisha was unhappy with you. She didn't belong in your sterile American world. She needed someone who understood her culture, her soul. So you stole her," Ethan said, his fists clenching. "I saved her," Vikram countered, his tone unwavering. Ethan took a step forward, but Aisha leapt between them, her voice trembling. Please, don't fight. It won't fix anything. She's right, Vikram said, stepping back, his composure intact. Violence isn't necessary. You're here. You found us. What do you want? Ethan stared at him, the question piercing through his anger. What did he want? Aisha's love, their old life. Those were gone, replaced by a stranger in a silk blouse. Revenge? Justice? Answers? I want the truth, he said finally, his voice firm. The whole truth. And then I want you to pay for what you've done. Vikram's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. Pay? We've already paid. Aisha can never see her family again. We can't return to India. We live under false names in a foreign land. Isn't that punishment enough? Not for me, Ethan said, his voice low and resolute. You live in a multi-million-dollar mansion, drive luxury cars, and bask in wealth. I've spent 8 years in hell. It wasn't our intention, Aisha interjected, her voice breaking. You didn't think at all, Ethan exploded, turning to her. You thought only of yourselves. Vikram walked to a sleek desk in the corner, opening a drawer. Ethan tensed, expecting a weapon, but Vikram produced a laptop. Want to see what we paid for? He asked, his tone mocking as he opened the device. Here are the private investigators' reports we used to monitor you. Copies of therapy bills we paid for, Dr. Sarah Chun, your therapist. We funded your treatment. Ethan stared at the screen, stunned. Documents detailed his life in Seattle, photos of him leaving his apartment, working late at Northwest Tech, grocery shopping. Bills showed thousands in therapy costs, funneled through anonymous payments. You had me watched, he said, his voice hollow. We had to ensure you were okay, Aisha said softly, her eyes pleading. It was the least we could do. The least, Ethan repeated, incredulous. The least would have been telling me the truth. And then what? Vikram snapped. You think you'd have been happier knowing your wife left you for me? That she was pregnant with my child? That she never truly loved you? The words struck Ethan like a physical blow, each one shattering the fragile remnants of his belief in their marriage. He turned to Aisha, his voice barely a whisper. Is that true? She raised her head, her dark eyes filled with guilt and sorrow. I was young, Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. I thought I loved you, but with Vikram, it was different. It felt real. Ethan slumped onto the sofa, the weight of her words crushing him. 8 years of grief, therapy, and rebuilding, all for a love that had been a lie. Not just her death, but their entire marriage, a cultural misunderstanding, as Vikram called it. The realization was a fresh wound, deeper than any he'd endured. What do you want from us? Vikram asked again, his tone softer, almost conciliatory. Ethan looked between them, the man who had orchestrated his pain and the woman he'd loved, now a stranger named Shreya. I want justice, he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. If you don't turn yourselves in, I'll do it for you. Vikram and Aisha exchanged a glance, a silent communication born of years of shared secrets. The air thickened with tension, the confrontation teetering on a dangerous edge. We can't allow that, Vikram said slowly, his voice low and menacing. Ethan's heart raced. What do you mean? Vikram opened another drawer, pulling out a small, sleek pistol. Ethan's blood ran cold. I mean you won't tell anyone, Vikram said, his calm chilling. Aisha gasped. Vikram, no? This wasn't the plan. There is no plan anymore, Vikram replied, his eyes locked on Ethan. You ruined everything by coming here. Ethan raised his hand slowly, his mind racing. You're not going to shoot me, he said, projecting more confidence than he felt. That would raise too many questions. Would it? Vikram mused, his grip steady. A depressed American tourist, hallucinating his dead wife, takes his own life. The police would call it a tragic suicide. Vikram, please, Aisha pleaded, stepping toward him. He's still. You're what? Vikram cut her off, his voice sharp. Your husband? You're dead, Shreya. I'm your husband now. Ethan watched the exchange, a realization dawning. You've controlled her all these years, he said, his voice steady. This wasn't a partnership. You manipulated her. Vikram's smile was cold, predatory. Aisha was always pliable. She needed guidance. You were too weak, too Western, spoiling her instead of leading her. I loved her, Ethan said, his voice raw. Love makes you weak, Vikram replied. Control makes you strong. Ethan turned to Aisha, who sat curled on the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "Aisha," he said gently, "you don't have to be his prisoner anymore. Come with me. We'll go to the police together." Vikram laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "She'll never go with you. She's too entangled in this. She's as guilty as I am." "That's not true," Ethan said, his eyes on Aisha. "He manipulated you, coerced you. A court would see that." For a moment, Aisha wavered, her gaze darting between the two men, the one who had loved her and the one who had caged her. "Shreya," Vikram said, his voice a warning, emphasizing her new name. "Remember who you are? Remember what you'd lose." "Lose what?" Ethan countered. "A life as his possession? A gilded cage?" "I gave her everything," Vikram shouted, his composure cracking. "Luxury, security, a new life. Without you, she'd be free," Ethan said, taking a cautious step forward. Vikram's hand trembled, the gun wavering. "Stop," he ordered, but Ethan moved closer, his voice steady. "You won't shoot. You're a businessman, not a killer. You solve problems with money and manipulation. You don't know me," Vikram hissed, sweat beading on his forehead. "I know you better than you think," Ethan said. "I watched you undermine my marriage for years." He pulled out his phone, the screen glowing with a recording app he'd activated moments earlier. "I've recorded everything, where I am, who I'm with. If anything happens to me, it goes to the police automatically." It was a bluff, but Vikram's eyes widened, panic flickering. "You're lying," he said, his voice faltering. "Try me," Ethan said, holding up the phone. "See what happens when an American disappears in Vancouver after finding his dead wife." The moment stretched, taut and suffocating. Vikram's gaze darted between Ethan and Aisha, his carefully constructed world unraveling. Suddenly, Aisha leapt to her feet. "Enough!" she screamed, her voice raw. "I can't do this anymore." She lunged at Vikram, grappling for the gun. "This is my fault, Vikram. Give it to me." "No," Vikram shouted, struggling to keep hold. A shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space, the bullet lodging harmlessly in the ceiling. Ethan seized the moment, tackling Vikram as the gun flew from his hand, skidding under a sofa. The two men grappled, Ethan's years of pent-up rage fueling his strength. Though Vikram was fit, Ethan's fury gave him the edge. He pinned Vikram to the floor, his arms locked down. "Aisha, call the police," he gasped. But Aisha stood frozen, her hands covering her face. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't." "You have to," Ethan urged, holding Vikram down. "This is your chance to be free." "Free?" Aisha laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "I'll never be free. I'm a fraud, a liar. I stole 8 years of your life." "It wasn't just you," Ethan said, his voice softening. "He manipulated you." Vikram laughed from beneath him, a manic, desperate sound. "She'll never choose you. She's not the woman you knew." Ethan looked at Aisha, her face etched with despair, and realized Vikram was right. The Aisha he'd loved was gone, reshaped by years of deception and control. "You're right," he said quietly, releasing Vikram and standing. "She's not the same, but that doesn't erase your crimes." He dialed 911, his voice clear as he spoke to the operator. "I'm reporting insurance fraud and identity theft at 1247 Chartwell Drive, West Vancouver." Vikram lunged forward, but Ethan raised a hand. "It's over," he said. "It was over the moment I saw you in Gastown." In the 20 minutes before the police arrived, a surreal calm settled over the house. Vikram sat on his designer sofa, staring blankly, while Aisha stood at the window, gazing at the ocean. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "For everything." "So am I," Ethan replied, standing by the door. "I'm sorry you never had the chance to be yourself." When the police arrived, Vikram and Aisha surrendered without resistance, their hands cuffed as officers led them away. Ethan gave a detailed statement, recounting the fraud, the staged death, the years of deception. The investigation would be complex, spanning international jurisdictions, with assets to seize and fake identities to unravel. Weeks later, in Seattle, Ethan sat in Dr. Sarah Chen's office, the familiar space a quiet anchor. He recounted the Vancouver confrontation, his voice steady but heavy. "How do you feel now?" Dr. Chen asked. "Empty," Ethan said after a pause. "But it's a different emptiness, not grief, but a cleared space, like the slate's been wiped clean." "Can you start over?" she asked. I have to, Ethan said. 8 years are gone, but I have time left. I can choose what to do with it. 6 months later, Vikram was sentenced to 12 years in prison for insurance fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. Aisha received 5 years, with the possibility of parole after 3, the court acknowledging her coercion and remorse. Ethan never visited her in prison. He'd said all he needed to in Vancouver. Instead, he focused on rebuilding, piece by piece. He traveled more, took up hiking in the Cascades, and began mentoring young engineers at Northwest Tech. The Aisha he'd loved had died, not in a Mumbai car crash, but in the slow erosion of lies and manipulation. From that loss, something new emerged, a chance for Ethan to live authentically, free from the shadows of a fabricated past.